Good morning, everybody. I hope you found session one good, useful. You could work through that. Obviously, the purpose of that session was to build up a bit of knowledge, to revisit things you would have learned in class from your teacher about Macbeth, and look at it through the lens of power. So to think specifically about how power is presented and shown throughout the play. What I want to do in session two then is to apply that knowledge a little bit and to do a little bit of practice writing. We're just going to look at an exam style task and getting it going and started. So what I've created here are two very similar exam questions. One of which I've said here, my question. The idea being with this one that I will model how to answer that question. How does Shakespeare present Lady Macbeth as a powerful character? And then over on the right hand side of the screen, your question is incredibly similar. How does Shakespeare present Macbeth as a powerful character? So you can see very similar tasks, very similar questions with a slight change so that I can practice and show you how to do it, and then you can practice applying what I taught you. So first of all, it's always important to plan first. So you've got your exam question, you don't want to just jump into it, you want to make a few notes first. So I obviously need to highlight the most important words. So Lady Macbeth, the focus of my question is her. I will also write about Macbeth because obviously they're so interlinked. But my primary focus is her. And then my other key word here is obviously power. And we talked a lot about that in the last session. So we're going to look at what it is about her that represents power. So the first thing I can do, now that I've highlighted the keywords in the task, is make a few notes. I'm not going to make a detailed plan at this stage. I'm just going to note out a few points and things that are important in relation to power and Lady Macbeth. And we spoke about this a lot in the last session. Obviously, we see her, the fact that the main type of power she has is emotional power, isn't it? She's able to persuade and control Macbeth. Now, obviously, we spoke about the fact that he is quite easy to persuade. So perhaps it's what he wants anyway, but we can still see that emotional power. We also need to talk about patriarchal structure here, don't we? Because Lady Macbeth ultimately lacks power because of the patriarchal structure of Jacobean England. She can't just choose to kill the king and enact that choice herself. She has to persuade her husband to do it. So we get a sense of powerlessness within that. But obviously she's able to use her other forms of power to overcome that limitation. We also can't really talk about Lady Macbeth and power without ambition, because what she is ambitious for is royal power, that ultimate power, that ultimate form of control that she so desires for her husband and herself. And then obviously we see through her the destructive effects of power, particularly in the sleepwalking scene. So Lady Macbeth, she craves power. She has this desire to persuade her husband to commit an act of evil in order to achieve power. But actually, by the end of the play, we see a broken woman who is surprised by the consequences of her choices. Okay, so I've just made, it's not a detailed plan, but it's a starting point of some big ideas about Lady Macbeth as a powerful character. In some ways she is powerful, but in other ways she's not. Please can you do exactly the same for Macbeth? Can you pause the video, and in the same way I just made a few initial notes for my question, can you please do the same for Macbeth, thinking about in what ways is he powerful, what types of power does he have, but also in what ways does he lack power? Okay guys, well done. Obviously if we were in class I'd love to take some feedback, and I know you will have come up with some really clever answers and ideas. Just in case anyone is struggling with any of this, I think with Macbeth, his power is similar to hers in that she has, in some ways he's powerful, in other ways less so. His main type of power at the beginning of the play is of course his physical power, his violence, his ability to defeat and destroy his enemy is highly apparent at the beginning, isn't it? He also has respect. It's a type of power. He can influence others because he's respected by the king and by the other thanes. He's got hierarchical power. Now, if you remember from the last session, hierarchy means a society which is organised by your status within society. Well, Macbeth is a thane. He becomes third in line to the throne, so he has that hierarchical power and that authority. But of course, very much like his wife, he also has the ambition for royal power. What he craves is not to be third in line, but to be number one, to be the top guy. And of course, exactly the same as with his wife, he also represents the destructive effects. Of power, which is won through evil choices. Power that is not power which is not legitimate. And obviously with him we see it much sooner. We see his guilt initially, don't we? We see his tyrannical behaviour. We see that's obviously driven by his fear of that he won't maintain his power because Banquo's children will be heirs. So with Macbeth we see very different power. We see him as this powerful figure, but we also see him destroyed, and really he disempowers himself, doesn't he, through his choices. So we've got a few ideas here about Macbeth as a character. At the peak of his hierarchical power, he also fundamentally disempowers himself because he loses a sense of who he is. Okay, so we can now use those ideas and points to create our introduction to this essay task we're working on. What I'd like to do before that is just to quickly write down the letters GST and what those letters stand for, please. So if you could pause the video and do that. Super. Hopefully you remember that those letters stand for general specific thesis, and they are the kind of formula, if you like, for creating an introduction. 3-sentence introduction, precise and clear, but 3 sentences that have very specific function. One which gives an overview of the question in relation to the play, one which goes into more detail, and one which sets out a big idea. And what I've done on this screen is suggested some parameters, some sentence parameters, which will help you whilst you practice this structure. Firstly, our general sentence is going to start with throughout the play, so that we can write generally about how power is presented throughout the play. In particular, to get our specific sentence, because that forces us to say something more detailed. And then also we're going to have a semicolon in the word however. This play is full of contradictions and change, and so if we use that word however, it allows us to show our understanding of those moments of change and those different ways of interpreting the play. And then finally our thesis, it seems that Shakespeare, because as soon as we use the author's surname, we're shifting away from talking about the play to talking about the authorial intention. Okay, so if we go back to our 2 questions then, obviously my question is still sat here on the left. How does Shakespeare present Lady Macbeth as a powerful character? So I shall model writing my 3 sentences, and then I'm going to ask you to practice writing your 3 sentences. So obviously I'm going to start with the words throughout the play. So throughout the play, and my focus of my question is Lady Macbeth, so I'm going to have a comma there, and then I shall say Lady Macbeth is a character who is driven by a desire for power and persuades her husband to commit an act of regicide to fulfill her ambitions. So hopefully you can see there that I've just given a general overview of Lady Macbeth. I haven't really said anything about her, whether she's powerful or not yet. I've just said she's driven by a desire for power and persuades her husband. So very general in introduction to her character. So now I can start my specific sentence and I can say in particular, and now I'm going to say more specifically what type of power Lady Macbeth has. So we can say in particular, Lady Macbeth, Lady Macbeth is presented as emotionally powerful when she persuades her husband to kill King Duncan. And immediately after the act, when she ensures that the plan is carried out. And now obviously what I mean by that is the fact that she takes the knives back to the guards. So now I can have my semicolon and then my however moment. So I've said, obviously, haven't I, that she is emotionally powerful. So now I'm going to say a way in which she's not powerful, because however signals a moment of change. However, Lady Macbeth also lacks real power throughout, as she is operating within a patriarchal society, so is dependent upon her husband. So because this is just my introduction, I haven't said a lot there, because these are big ideas I'm going to prove as I progress through my response. But I've established that she's powerful because she, demonstrates this emotional power. However, she lacks power because of the patriarchal structure. So now lastly, I can do my thesis statements. So I can say, it seems that Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth. So I'm always talking about how he uses the character, because characters fundamentally are a device. They're a method that a writer uses to create meaning. So it seems that Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth to, and then I obviously need an intent verb. Shows is banned, so I could have something like explore, or warn, or criticise, or advocate, anything like that. But I'm just going to go with to reveal, because that's always a nice one. It seems that Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth to reveal the limitations or the okay, I'm a little bit stuck here. I'm not sure what I want to say. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my plan, because I made a plan and I made these 4 bullet points of ideas. And when I'm trying to write and I'm thinking about the writing and I'm trying to think of what to say, it's really hard. My brain gets overloaded, and yours will do the same. But that's the beauty of a plan, so that when you're writing and you start losing your flow, you can go back to the plan. And obviously this is the key point, isn't it? That ambition, acting on ambition, can have destructive effects. So that helps clarify for me. It seems that Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth to reveal the ways that acting upon ambition to achieve power can have devastating consequences and destroy individuals and society. Okay, so let's have a quick read through the whole thing. Throughout the play, Lady Macbeth is a character who is driven by a desire for power and persuades her husband to commit an act of regicide to fulfil her ambitions. In particular, Lady Macbeth is presented as emotionally powerful when she persuades her husband to kill King Duncan, and immediately after the act when she ensures that the plan is carried out. However, Lady Macbeth also lacks real power throughout, as she is operating within a patriarchal society, so is dependent upon her husband. It seems that Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth to reveal the ways that acting upon ambition to achieve power can have devastating consequences and destroy individuals and society. Now, the key thing here is obviously that this is just a platform for the rest of the essay. I'm not really going to get any credit for this unless the rest of the essay is me finding evidence from the play that supports some of these ideas I've introduced and analysing it in greater depth. But the introduction is a wonderful platform, a wonderful way to take a plan, to set up some big ideas that you can then work on later. So obviously please come back for session 3 tomorrow, which will be doing exactly that. Building upon what we've done and using it to write the next paragraph. But for now, you need to use my example to write your own GST paragraph in response to this question. And as always, if you would like it checked, please email it to your English teacher. Thanks, guys.